Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar on Veeam Disaster Recovery in Microsoft Azure, which includes our first ever networking appliance, Veeam PN for Microsoft Azure. My name is Vic Clary. I'm a product marketing manager at Veeam, and with me today is Anthony Spiteri, one of our global technical evangelists. The two of us will share more info with you today about this great new product and the components that are associated with it. So to start, I have a couple housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll post the recording as well as the presentation online next week, and we'll notify you by email when we do that. And also, you've been automatically muted upon entry, so if you have any questions, please use the GoToWebinars, the question panel, the question box, and we'll answer them collectively at the end. All right, so here's a look at the agenda. I'll take a few minutes to update you on some recent Veeam facts and stats, and then we'll dive into Veeam Disaster Recovery in Microsoft Azure and introduce Veeam PN for Microsoft Azure and provide you a demo, and then wrap up with some helpful links and any questions that you might have. All right. So let's get started. So for those of you who are new to Veeam, Veeam's a global organization with around 2,500 employees that was founded in 2006, and we have offices all over the world with our headquarters in Switzerland. And currently we have over 242,000 customers worldwide, and we protect almost 14 million virtual machines now. And thanks to most of you, we've experienced amazing growth, 59% year-over-year growth to date. So throughout our history, we've been very fortunate to receive considerable customer growth from businesses of all sizes, and within the last 2 years have experienced incredible growth within the enterprise segment specifically, and currently 56% of the Global 2000 and 74% of Fortune 500 companies are using Veeam. And right now we're adding about 4,000 new customers each month and expect to have right around 400,000 customers by the end of 2018. Also, we've received great feedback in this year's customer satisfaction survey. So for those of you who answered the survey, we thank you for your responses and for providing us honest feedback. And looking at these results here, we've continued an impressive 4-year upward trend in key customer satisfaction indicators, including receiving a 9 out of 10 in overall customer satisfaction, 9.1 out of 10 in the likelihood of for customers to recommend Veeam to their friends or their colleagues, which obviously means a lot to us, as well as a 9.1 out of 10 in the likelihood for a customer to renew their contract. So we're really happy with these recent results and this continued improvement in overall satisfaction from our customer base. Probably most telling of all the results from this survey is our Net Promoter Score, and we earned another very high Net Promoter Score of plus 73 this year. And Net Promoter Scores are they're a satisfaction measure that are based on a customer's willingness to recommend a company through just one basic question, and that question is, how likely are you to recommend Veeam to others? And the scores can range anywhere from plus 100 at the highest to minus 100 at the lowest, based on a formula that compares a business's numbers of customers who won't recommend them from the number who will happily recommend them. And our industry's average score currently hovers around 32. And this year we received a 73 from our customers, and and plus 73 is more than 2 times the industry average. And you can see here how it ranks among our competitors, but it also ranks us with great companies that have a similar Net Promoter Score and are publicly known for having very loyal customer bases like Costco and Apple and even Amazon.com. So we're real excited to be in such good company. But in addition to that, you don't have to just take it from us, and our customers, because the industry's analysts have also been very kind to Veeam lately and have recognized the work that we have put in to deliver a well-rounded product, and that our business is really on the move. And in 2016, we were recognized by Gartner as a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for their data center backup and recovery software category, which we were very honored to receive this recognition. And IDC and Ovum as well also placed us in their industry leaders category too. So we're real happy to get this recognition and the confidence from the analyst firms. And hopefully that confidence passes down to you as you invest initially in Veeam, if you haven't done so already, or as you continue to invest in more of our products, which is a nice segue to talk more about our products here. So Veeam's product line has evolved significantly the past 3 years, and through a number of new products and great technology, we've rapidly expanded our overall technology footprint and product offering, from focusing, in the old days almost exclusively on Veeam Availability Suite, to focusing now more holistically on Veeam Availability Platform, which helps us enable any business to deliver the digital life experience that users expect with an always-on cloud availability platform. So our goal, by expanding outside of Veeam Availability Suite, is to provide always-on availability for any service across any cloud or infrastructure. And we do this to help you deliver a faster pace of innovation and improve service delivery of the actual speed of your business. And this includes support for any infrastructure, on-prem, converged, and hyper-converged infrastructure. It includes privately hosted and partner-managed private clouds. It includes the hyperscale public clouds such as AWS and Azure and Google. And it also includes critical SaaS services like backup for Office 365, for example. And we understand that it's your data, and you need to own and manage this, all this data efficiently, no matter which infrastructure it resides on. So that's why we've made so many additions to our product line in the past 12 months. And this is kind of a nice segue to today's discussion as well, and that's the introduction of Veeam Disaster Recovery, Microsoft Azure. And as you know, times have changed significantly, and the SLAs that you're expected to deliver are much different than they were even 2 years ago. So when a disaster strikes today, you need a solution that'll deliver on-demand disaster recovery in the cloud. And even though the cloud has made DR much more affordable than ever, we also understand it can still be a major struggle to manage due to the complexities of setup and overall management. So what we introduced for the first time publicly just a few weeks ago at Veeam at our event in New Orleans is Veeam Disaster Recovery Microsoft Azure. And this solution helps businesses of all sizes maintain business continuity and availability for their most critical workloads with next generation on-demand DR in the cloud. And what it does is deliver cloud restore for Veeam backups to optimize resource allocation and gain new DR options, coupled with an easy-to-use, new and free lightweight software-defined networking solution to simplify setup and connectivity regardless of location. And there are two components to this that make up this solution, and they're Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure, which many of you know is currently built into Veeam Backup and Replication, as well as our suites into Veeam Availability Suite and Veeam Backup Essentials. And this is coupled with our new and free networking component, which Anthony is going to talk about more here in just a couple minutes, Veeam PN for Microsoft Azure. And if you look at this from a business perspective, this solution is designed to do a number of things. It's designed to save you time when recovering VMs in the cloud and avoiding complicated VPN networking connectivity procedures, and ultimately help make networking and connectivity as easy as possible. It'll also help save you resources by leveraging the affordability of Azure, and save on the labor that's associated with losing one of your admins for hours while they flip through a networking manual to figure out what they're actually doing when they're trying to set up connectivity to the cloud. It also obviously save you money and relieve the pain associated with completely losing critical VMs and connectivity during disaster. And you know, and once again, one of the great things about this new appliance is that it's designed for any size business, and even for service providers to use for their tenants. So, okay, I'm going to hand the floor over to Anthony now, who will get more of the technical details that you guys have all been waiting for.
Thanks, Vic. Good afternoon or good morning, guys. How are you all? So thanks for joining the webinar. So as Vic introduced disaster recovery from Microsoft Azure, I'm going to deep dive into the Veeam PN or Veeam Powered Network component of that solution. And Veeam PN for Microsoft Azure is a free solution. And I don't think we mentioned that actually, that this coupled with Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure, which is also free, is completely free for the networking component as well. It's available for deployment from the Azure Marketplace and also from Veeam.com for on-premises or cloud deployments. So that is to say that it's not only available through the Azure Marketplace, it is available standalone as well. What it does in a nutshell is it basically gives users and enterprise and companies a site-to-site and point-to-site networking solution that is designed to keep employees connected and always on, regardless of where they are. So, you know, the typical locations, the main office, the home office, the temporary office, or, you know, if you've got someone who's on the road traveling. Veeam PN is designed to keep these guys connected to the on-premises network or to a restored bunch of computers or machines or workloads that are running in Microsoft Azure. So taking a look at the components, what we've got here, we've got a slide that shows a main office, we've got Microsoft Azure, or another site being another service provider, and then we've got a bunch of locations, a temporary office, a home office, some remote workers, and even another home office there just for good luck. What we do is we basically deploy the Veeam PN hub server into Azure. We also deploy a Veeam PN site gateway into the on-premises location. And from there, we create a bunch of site-to-site or point-to-site VPNs. And that effectively works to extend the main office network to the Azure network and into these networks that you see on the right-hand side. So how does Veeam PN help businesses? In a nutshell, what we're talking about with these first 2 points is we're trying to free up resources. Typically, we all know that networking is still a very, very complicated piece of the DR puzzle. So what we've been able to do is create a solution that simplifies that part of it, that creates a site-to-site or a point-to-site VPN without the hassle. Literally in a couple of clicks, you can extend your on-premises network to your Azure network for the purpose of DR. So what we're saying, it eliminates the manual networking connectivity and complicated VM installations. And if we have a look at a couple of use cases, this one is typically looking at a main office location. And the main office has a bunch of workloads running on either VMware, Hyper-V, we've got the agents there, we've got physical servers, everything that Veeam can now back up. And we're bringing all these workloads into a Veeam backup repository that lives on site. If we ever were to lose any one of these workloads, we've now got a solution where we could fire up Microsoft Azure, use Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure to restore the VM into Azure, have them running, launch a VPN hub server, create a VPN site-to-site, and extend that company network. That's one particular use case. If we're looking at another use case, we've got the situation here where we've got a main office. This main office has had a full failure. What we've actually done with this main office is we've had a remote office, and we've actually used a backup copy job to get the machines or the workloads that are running on premises to this remote office. What we can then do again is get Microsoft Azure up. We can use Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure to restore the workloads into the Azure cloud and then extend the network using Veeam PN. Okay, and that's going to extend that company network there so the workloads become available no matter where you are. In terms of the components, Veeam PN has a couple. So at its heart, it's a standalone Linux-based OVA, which it's a little appliance. It sits at about 1.5 gigs in size, and it's designed to, again, orchestrate the site-to-site and point-to-site virtual private networks. And it works in a hub and spoke architecture. And I'll explain that a little bit later on what I mean by the hub and spoke. Veeam solution makes orchestrating this VPN simpler, more user-friendly, and easier to manage. This is what we really set out. When the R&D guys went to design this product and get it to market, we really wanted to take an issue that was complicated, complex, cumbersome VPN connectivity, whether it be IPsec, whether it be more sort of traditional MPLS or VPLS connectivity, point to point. We wanted to simplify that product, and that's effectively what we've done here. Again, the goal is to make VPNs less complex and cumbersome. So in terms of the actual components, the main VPN component, or the hub, lives in Azure as an appliance and connects to site gateways or the spokes. So there's our hub and spoke comparison there. These site gateways, they run in any office organization, so whether it be on-premises, local, remote, home office, or temporary location, you can effectively deploy these components anywhere and connect back to that central hub. The hub is the core of the VPN infrastructure, and it's responsible for all the background work, which includes the traffic routing, the encryption, the user management, and the authentication. The hub is supposed to be accessible from all remote networks added to the VPN. So that is to say that every site that you connect and configure to the hub is accessible either from the remote location, or if an end user is coming in and connecting through to the hub, they have access to all of those sites. In terms of those remote users, so standalone users, they don't obviously need to deploy a site gateway or an appliance. How they work through an open VPN, and it's a good time now to sort of say that this technology is actually built on top of the very mature, very trusted open source VPN platform, okay? So effectively what that means is that you've got a ready-to-use self-contained configuration file, which gets generated, and I'll show this a bit later in the demo, and that file is used to establish communication with the main hub appliance. The VPN is created, it's a star network topology, and all traffic in the VPN is always routed through the network hub again. This kind of gives a bit of a visual, logical overview of what we've been talking about. You can see we've got Microsoft Azure there, we've got our VMs there, we've got a hub server. And then if you look at the head office and branch office, we've got the on-premises site gateways, which are hooked up site to site to that hub server. And we've also got at the bottom there a couple of standalone clients. And those standalone clients, again, connect to the hub server. And what you have after all this is a situation where head office can talk to branch office, hub server can talk to any of the other ones, and the clients coming in can talk to every single component there. So again, we're creating this hub and spoke, or this mesh sort of scenario here, which allows ease of access in those particular use cases for DR or just VPN access. If we look at the two types of VPNs that we're configuring here, we've got a site-to-site, and the site-to-site VPN allows you to establish a secure connection between remote networks on a public network. Veeam PN also lets you set up a VPN exclusively for on-premises networks. Okay, all the traffic again between the remote sites is routed over a secure connection, so using TLS. Veeam PN supports two deployment scenarios. So we talked about the Microsoft Azure through the marketplace, but you can also deploy this standalone in an on-premises network and have the same sort of configuration. The network hub acts as one point of the VPN tunnel, and the site gateway or gateways, or the remote networks, make the other points. So that is that site to site. And taking a look at that graphically, we've got a situation here with Azure. We've got a Azure with a network hub. We've got the site gateway on a local company site. We've got the VPN tunnel up. If we look at this without the Azure scenario, we've got site A and site B. You've got the network hub, the site gateway connects that up, and you've got the VPN tunnel connecting both sites. Okay, so quite simple. I mean, it's not rocket science when you look at what's happening here. It's no different in terms of what you guys would traditionally know with regards to, IPsec or any sort of VPN. But again, it's the ease and simplicity of what we're able to achieve that really makes this product stand out. And I can only show you that in the demo, so stay tuned for that. When we talk about the point to site, we're talking about allowing you to establish a secure connection from a standalone computer to a remote network. As well as the site-to-site, the point-to-site scenario is configured and organized around the network hub. And this lets a remote user access the VPN through an open VPN client, okay? And it must use a configuration file that's generated from the hub. And again, we'll see that a little later on. The user side, it's very simple. If you're an end gateway, you don't need any site gateway configuration files. You don't need any public IP addresses or DNS name. It's all self-contained in this open VPN configuration file, which is generated. And just an example again, if you've got Microsoft Azure, you've got a bunch of VPN endpoints which connect in to the network hub and they get access to those restored VMs. Or if you had it without the Azure scenario and you had a local company site with the network hub, the same applies. Okay, I've talked a little bit about the configuration process, and again, we'll see this in the demo, but really what we've created here is a situation where it makes it possible for users not to worry about pairing sites. No, most of you on the call at one stage in your careers have tried to pair an IPsec VPN and know the pain involved, you know, the key sharing, the encryption types, even just different hardware types or disparate hardware can actually lead to problems. That's what we're trying to make simpler here. Effectively, the hub, through the UI that we've created, performs all the tasks for the user or for the administrator. Okay, and most of the work associated with this, deploying the appliances, generating the configuration files, is through the OpenVPN configuration. And in many cases, once you've deployed the appliances, we can extend a network via the VPN in less than 5 minutes. Okay, and that's something to really sit back and think about. In under 5 minutes, you can have a fully functional VPN without any issues. Just connect it up, no problems. In terms of what it looks like in the configuration process, once you've deployed the Veeam PN appliance from the Azure Marketplace or the on-prem, you go through the Azure Marketplace configuration steps, and I will show you that in a few minutes. You'll log into the web interface, complete the Azure setup. You'll then create the Veeam PN site configurations for site-to-site, and if you want, you can create the Veeam PN endpoint configuration files for the point-to-site, for the end users. On those on-premises location or remote sites, you deploy the Veeam PN appliances as site gateway. You then import the Veeam PN site configuration files generated from the hub, and that's all that you need to do. Within a couple of seconds, it'll connect, and that's all you've got. And if you're using an endpoint connection, again, all you do is effectively import that configuration file into the OpenVPN client, and it'll do all the work for you. So what I'm going to do now is go through a little bit of a technical deep dive to get a little bit more under the hood of what we've actually put into this solution. I'm going to kind of skip through this fairly quickly because I want to show you guys the demos and then get into some questions, because hopefully you guys have a few questions once we go through that. So again, we've built this product, Veeam Powered Network, on top of OpenVPN, and there's a number of reasons for that, but effectively it's because it's highly reliable, highly manageable, it's open source, and very trusted, okay? And from that point of view, it's very configurable as well. There's situations that pops up where you would need to change the port setting, and I'll show you this again when we're setting up the Azure site, where you can actually change the ports to actually have them listening for the site-to-site or the point-to-site VPN. It's very secure. So if you need to do any auditing performance or you guys have need for compliancy, we've got the trusted OpenVPN platform which ticks all those boxes. And I think one of the biggest parts of OpenVPN is that it supports all major OSs, okay? So when you think about Windows, Linux, Mac OS, every one of those has an OpenVPN client which can be used. And in fact, in my testing of the software, I've actually used all of those different platforms to connect into the same site VPN, the same hub. Okay, and the cool thing is you can also use iOS and Android and other mobile devices if you want as well. So it's very flexible. In terms of the OpenVPN integration, we've actually got on the appliance 2 separate independent OpenVPN servers. So that they don't work independently within each other. They work separately with the site-to-site and the point-to-site, 2 separate ones. Again, it's all managed through this internal interface, and we've got on-the-fly configuration. With regards to how we plug into Azure, we actually tie into the user-defined routing. So if you guys are familiar with the way that Azure does its networking, it's got this concept of UDR. using the ARM type of virtual machines or instances or resource pools. This provides a connectivity for Azure-based VMs back to all other sites. It's automatically deployed when you deploy from the marketplace, and it can be used for existing or new virtual networks. So that's to say, if you guys have already got machines that are in Azure, you can actually deploy the Veeam PN appliance and connect it to the hub and have it extended out to your site if you need to as well. I won't spend too much time on this slide. We're basically calling a lightweight SDN product, mainly because what we're doing is effectively using some sort of software-defined way to configure a network. Okay, so it's lightweight. You know, it's a start, and certainly as we improve the product and take it further, this lightweight tag might be removed, and we might actually get into more typical software-defined network as it is in the industry. In terms of what's inside, it's a Linux box, it's Ubuntu 16.04. Again, we're using OpenVPN. We've got a JSON RPC protocol-based web UI. We've got a bunch of monitoring systems in there, CollectD, RID, and we underpin it with IP tables for the IP translation and a few rules as well. We have some basic monitoring, and when I run through the actual UI, you'll be able to see this. So we've got some alerting for connected and disconnecting of the VPNs. We've got CPU utilization. We've got some email actions as well. There's logging. So obviously it's a fully supported product from Veeam, so you can ring up and get support. You can diagnose and get the diagnostic logging. And it's also got performance monitoring. So some traffic accounting, having a look at throughput in terms of packets, bytes, and speed, CPU utilization, and you can export all that to CSV as well. Maintenance, so we've got some ways, again, I guess what we haven't actually mentioned is that this is actually an RC at the moment. So we're currently in the RC phase, we haven't hit GA. It's RC on the Azure Marketplace. So that is to say we've got a few things that are going to be coming in the GA that aren't in the RC, like automatic updates as an example. But effectively the maintenance is going to be all built in for GA. So you won't need to do any work in terms of updating or keeping things going once we do release future updates for it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to dive into a demo. And what I wanted to show you guys first was actually from the Azure Marketplace, how easy it is to actually deploy a Veeam PN appliance. So if I click on the Marketplace, you'll see that we're listed in here. If I do a search for Veeam PN, we should pop up. Okay. And if we click on that one there, we've got the options here now. You've got the Veeam PN for Microsoft Azure, a brief description of what it all is. Let's go and create the service. So I'm just going to step through very quickly the 4 to 5 steps that it takes to actually create the hub or deploy the hub appliance into Azure. And to show you a lot of the automation work that our developers have gone into to make this process as streamlined as possible and as automated as possible as well. So I'm just going to give this one a quick name, put the username in, get the password there. Subscription, obviously using the subscription. The resource group, you can create a new one or use an existing one. I'm just going to create a new one here for the purpose of this demo. Location, doesn't really matter where we put it. I'm just going to put it for my default location where I am at the moment. And we'll move to the next step. And the next step is all about the actual instance that we're going to be using in Azure. So we've got 3 defaults that we're basically going to use that we recommend. I would actually go with the A1 basic because obviously the A1 standard and A2 standard have load balancing, which you don't actually need. The resources as they sit here, 1 core and 1.75 gigs of memory is plenty to basically handle most networking features. If you're deploying this on premises as a network hub, you've also obviously got a bit more flexibility in terms of what you can do. And also you've got flexibility in being able to upgrade the actual machine itself if it starts to have some issues with CPU. So let's just select that. Let's configure a storage account. Just going to select one that's existing. Let's give it an IP address. And this IP address is the external Azure IP address, which is used for your site-to-site and your end clients to come in and actually hook into the hub gateway and actually establish those VPN connections. So let's put one in here, click OK. A domain name, obviously we want to use a domain name as opposed to IP addresses. And what this information here, especially this domain name, this is actually hard-coded in the configuration XMLs and the configuration file for the OpenVPN that's generated from the VPN server. So it's very important these are obviously resolved to something. So let's give this name here as well. In terms of the virtual network, again, you can create a new one or use an existing one. I'm going to use an existing one for the purpose of this demo. And in the subnets as well, I'm going to use that existing subnet that was previously there. This next step is configuring a certificate. So a certificate is actually very important because it's effectively the way that we do every bit of authentication. So that is to say that we don't actually use any passwords, usernames, passwords. All the configuration files from the site to site and the point to site, they're all effectively authorized through an SSL certificate exchange, which is pretty handy. So you don't need to remember any passwords. I'm just going to go in here and do some certificate name. And then one thing to actually point out here as well is the Diffie-Hellman algorithm. Obviously, we recommend that you use 2048. Just be aware that obviously that does take a bit of time to generate. So when you're deploying this, it can take 10 plus minutes extra to actually generate it. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to select 1024 and click OK. And now probably the most important part is actual VPN configuration. And this is the part here where we want to enable the site-to-site VPN, and we want to enable the point-to-site VPN. So you can actually say we just want to enable the site-to-site, not enable point-to-site. Again, they're two independent OpenVPN components within the appliance. You can specify the protocol, so UDP or TCP, depending on, some networks block UDP by default. We've just given some flexibility here in what you're able to configure. And specifying the port. Again, this was kind of important, and I mentioned this earlier, where we've allowed the flexibility to not only use the default ports for these particular OpenVPN types, but you can come in here and actually say, I want to use 8443. And where this is handy is if you are in a network that's fairly stringent with outbound connectivity where non-standard ports are blocked, but you know that maybe 8443 or 443 or 21 or whatever is actually not blocked outbound. You can actually then configure the service to use any of those ports and go from there. So this is just effectively giving you guys a way to work around some tight networking restrictions that might exist. So click on OK here. It's going to give us a summary, and then we're going to be able to basically go and click on OK, and it'll deploy the appliance. It'll take about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on that Diffie-Hellman certificate that you've got. And one thing to actually note as well before we finish this up, you can actually download the template and parameters. So that is handy if you want to effectively take this particular configuration that you've got and deploy it a lot more easier through maybe PowerShell or some other deployment methodology through Azure. Okay, so I'm not actually going to click OK on that because I've got one that I prepared earlier. If we go through my virtual machines, you'll see that I've got a Veeam PN virtual machine. Okay, and that is effectively the Veeam Powered Network machine that's been deployed here. If we go to network interfaces, you'll see that we've got an external public IP. We've also got an internal private IP. Okay, and that private IP is effectively the same network where your Azure VMs will be sitting. So it's able to talk to those machines on that same network. If we actually go to the port rules, you can see that during deployment, we've actually predefined a number of rules. And these are those ports that we set for the site-to-site and the endpoint, but also to get to the web interface, we've got 443 and port 80, and also an SSH rule if you wanted to SSH to that actual machine there. Okay. So now that we've gone over that, what I wanted to do just to finish off the demo was to go through a use case. So I'm going to actually go into my TPM lab. This is where we actually run my Veeam Evangelist lab. And we've got a workload running. And I'm going to show you guys an example of a use case where we've got some workloads on premises. We've lost that particular workload. We'll then use Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure to restore that into Azure. and then use Veeam PN to extend the on-premises network to the Azure network and be able to access that workload as if it was on this local on-premises network. Okay, so what I've got here, I've actually got a ping going to a IP address, and that IP address is a server that's actually running a website. So if I fire up that website, it's a WordPress site, give it a couple of seconds to load. Okay, cool. We're running a Aperture Labs, that's the name of our lab, and we've got a good blog post about how cool and awesome Veeam Disaster Recovery from Microsoft Azure is. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is we're going to simulate a failure of that machine. So if I go power, and we power off that, and what we should see is obviously the ICMP request starts to time out. There we go. So now, for all intents and purposes, we've actually lost that workload, okay? So we've got Veeam PN deployed in Azure, and what I've done, just in the interest of saving time, is I've actually gone through and used our Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure technology to actually go into the Veeam backup and replication console and restore this VM into Azure. So at the moment, it's sitting there ready to go. What you're looking at now is the Veeam PN user interface. So when you log in, you get a dashboard that has your connections. And as you can see here, we've got a connection that's hooked into Azure. And that actually is the connection that links this hub. So this is the hub that lives in Azure, but we're also connected to that virtual network that we saw in Azure previously. We've also got a bunch of other connections here. So in this particular instance, I've actually extended this hub to connect to a couple of cloud locations. And also what we're going to do now is we're actually going to extend it to connect to this TPM lab, or this on-premises location where this workload was running. If we have a look at the clients, this is where we actually configure these networks. You can take a look here and see that I've got a bunch of site networks and a few endpoints. So if I actually go into the TPM one, which we want to extend now, and if I click on edit that, you'll see that as simple as it is, we give it a name and we give the network address and subnet, okay? That's all that we need, the two pieces of information to generate a file which can then be used on the site gateway to configure that and connect up to the hub in Azure. So let's click on next there, and we can see here it's actually said we've completed the wizard. Now you want to deploy the OpenVPN appliance to your site, apply the configuration file, and we'll be good. So I'll click on finish there. And what I'll actually do is actually download that file. So that's ready to go. It's an XML file, and then we're actually going to install that or deploy that into our local site gateway Veeam PN appliance. Just before that though, I wanted to show an example of a endpoint connection. So when we actually click on the fresh add one, we've got two options. We can either do the entire site or the standalone computer. And that standalone computer is that endpoint, so that point to site configuration. And all that is really is just a name, and that in turn will generate an OpenVPN configuration file which you can download, which is over here as well. So if you see I've got an example here, if I download that, it's an OpenVPN file. That's the one that you import into your OpenVPN client on the Mac, on Windows, on Linux, wherever you are. Okay, so back to the demo. If we have a look at my vSphere infrastructure, you can see that I've got a Veeam PN site appliance deployed here. And this site appliance is got the IP address of 10.0.30.254. So we've deployed it in that 10.0.30 network, which is what we actually had here configured as a site. Okay. So if I go to that IP address and log in, this is an out-of-the-box experience where it's saying, give me an initial configuration. So you've got two options here. You've got the network hub or the site gateway. So in this case, we're going to do the site gateway. Going to click on next. And it actually tells us what we need to configure. So if we didn't know what we're going to configure, it's smart enough to detect what network it's on, and it's going to tell us to go back to the hub and actually configure a site for this particular IP address and subnet mask. So let's load up that configuration file that we downloaded previously. Click on finish. And what you're going to see in a few seconds is that this disconnected state is going to go connected, okay? And when that happens, it's going to mean that we actually have, there we go, it's happened, So within that short period of time and within 2 clicks, we've effectively extended this on-premises network to that hub gateway, which then obviously extends to Azure. So that site-to-site VPN was connected and up and running within 2 clicks and about 10 seconds. Okay, so I really want you guys to think about the simplicity of that, the ease of it, and the fact that this is also a free product and a free solution at the moment. It blows my mind. Okay, so at the moment, just to finish the demo, if we go here, you can still see that we haven't actually got this ping up and running. We haven't got this workload up and running. The VM is running in Azure, but we need to do one more thing. And before I do that, if I go back to my Azure portal, I want to actually click on that machine. So this is actually the machine here that we've previously directly restored into Microsoft Azure. What I want to do is actually check out the network interface address and 10.1.0.5. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to create an IP translation rule. And this IP translation rule is going to effectively create a rule on the site gateway appliance that says, I'm going to listen out on this IP address, and this IP address is the IP address of the server as it was locally, and we're going to map it to that cloud IP address, which was 1.0.5. That's the WordPress. Let's just make sure that's all good. 10.1.0.5, that's correct. And we're trying to connect up to 10.0.30.90. Okay, so if we click on save and that, all things being equal in a couple of seconds, we should start to see an ICMP response back. Only this time we're going to be talking to the machine that's in Azure. Let's give it a couple of seconds to kick in. Can take a little bit of time. There we go. Okay, so that's awesome. So now we're actually running, this ping is actually now talking to the IP address, which is actually now on the site gateway, the Veeam PN site gateway, but it's doing an IP mapping to the actual appliance up in Azure. So if we go back to the Aperture Labs website and we load it up again, it's going to load up, but this time it's loading up over the extended network through Veeam PN from on-premises to the Azure restored VM. So once that loads up, the demo is done, and hopefully we can start to take some questions. But I think Vic needs to finish up with a couple of closing decks before that.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Anthony. Thanks a lot. Yeah, we have two more just basic wrap-up slides for you, and I've seen a couple questions come through regarding that, and that's why we have these final slides. We'll give it a second to pop up here. So keep in mind you can download the release candidate right now of Veeam PN through our site for your on-premises deployment. And I know that Craig asked about that. It's the green button at the top of the page, and through the Azure Marketplace for Azure deployments. And you can do that right now through these two links that are listed here on this slide. The top link also leads you to our product web page, which has a link to the 30-day trial for Veeam Availability Suite 2, where you can download the free trial of 9.5, which includes Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure, so you can leverage the whole technology if you don't already have 9.5. And then you can also read more on this website page as well about the solution in general. And then also on the web page and listed out separately here, we encourage you to download a short white paper we released recently as well, covering 4 reasons how Veeam PN makes DR in Azure easy. It's a great short read, and it covers 4 of the best use cases for using the new technology. I think you'll really like it, and it's short. It's like 4.5 pages, so I encourage you to download that as well if you get a chance. And now we can go to questions, Anthony. I think there's some good ones here on the page.
Cool, no worries. Do you wanna ask them and I can answer them? Is that how we want to do it, or?
Yeah, if you want. Yeah, I can.
Yeah,
So
do that.
So it looks like Carl asked, and I'm not exactly sure on this question, is the VMware support incident you just submitted relevant to Veeam DR? He says that he uses VMware.
Is the VMware support incident just submitted? I'm not sure if I understand the question, but yeah. So Veeam DR, or in this instance, obviously, Veeam PN can be extended to any hypervisor. So yeah, the use case goes on VMware, goes to the Hyper-V. It doesn't really matter. And obviously, if you've got a VMware infrastructure on premises, you can extend that to an Azure network as well. So yeah, I'm not sure if that directly answers the question, but maybe Carl, if you can ask that in a slightly different way, we might be able to answer that a little bit better.
Yeah, and then let's see, we have an existing Azure VPN from our data center to our Azure tenant for production workloads. Could we use Veeam PN to replace this existing setup, and how would this be achieved?
Who asked that? Was that?
Mike
Okay,
asked that.
Mike asked it. Okay, I'm just trying to get to that one. Um, so this definitely could replace that. So in terms of how this would be achieved, I guess you kind of saw, how it actually gets deployed. You saw an on-premises setup for the site gateway. So it's pretty easy to set up. In terms of replacing it, what you could do is your existing VNets or your existing machines are in Azure. They're obviously in a VNet. You saw that we're able to, when we're deploying it into the marketplace, we can select that particular VNet. So as long as you can select that, you should be able to deploy an Azure Veeam PN instance through the marketplace, hook it up to that network, and then extend on the other end using a Veeam PN site gateway appliance. So it can be done if you want to.
Awesome. And then Richard asked, are there any costs to get your backup down from Azure?
Yeah, so there is. So any, all standard sort of fees and charges apply with regards to Azure subscription. So yeah, I mean any download, ingress, egress, is susceptible to an Azure charge. But then again, obviously that's relative to your location as well, and different rates for different locations. But yeah, the short answer there is definitely yes.
Yeah, and then Dennis asked, how does it scale? How does VPN scale? What are the estimated
Okay.
limits so far that we've come up, that we've seen?
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment, it's an RC, and we're actually going through some validation points at the moment to see to get some numbers for GA. So we haven't published any numbers yet. Suffice to say that OpenVPN is very scalable from that sense. So if you obviously look up any OpenVPN literature and see the scalability of that, it's going to match what this is. But certainly, close to the time of GA, we will have some numbers. And the great thing about it and the beauty of it, I think, is that where it's probably going to scale, where we'll need to have a bit of scalability, is in the fact that it's doing quite a bit of certificate key generation, right? And that's a CPU intensive process. So if anything, your CPU might need to be sized when you're deploying these things, but that's obviously going to be more in line when we release the literature on it. You'll be able to then get an idea if you've got 50 or 100 clients, maybe use instance X or instance Y. So look out for that closer to GA.
Yeah, and then Darren had a couple questions. His first question was, can Veeam PN be used to connect my main campus data center to my secondary data center, or is it specifically to connect to Azure?
Great question. So certainly the use case goes beyond Azure. Obviously, we want that to be the main use case. It's great. We've got some great hooks into Azure, um, going into the user-defined routing and service-defined names and all that kind of jazz. But certainly, if you notice one of the slides, there was an on-premises deployment method as well. So certainly, you can deploy this in your primary data center as the hub, and that secondary data center can be the site gateway. So the short answer to that is yes, it can be done. And in fact, a lot of people that we've early adopters of this are actually using this for just that sort of VPN connectivity. So not so much a DR scenario, but just as a really good, solid, easy VPN setup.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. So his second question was, what's the best way to get our backup data into Azure?
Well, obviously, hopefully you're a Veeam customer and hopefully using Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure, because that
Right.
will be able to do it, right? That's the best way. I mean, that's going to take any type of VM or any type of workload that's in a Veeam repository. So whether that be a virtual machine on VMware, on Hyper-V, a physical server, a Linux server, you can actually take, or an endpoint even using the agents that we've got now, you can actually restore that using Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure.
Gotcha. So Rodney asked, is the private IP address in Azure set automatically?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So as soon as you configure or select that subnet, you have got a bit of flexibility in there, but a lot of the Azure rules come into play there, and you can have some flexibility if you do want to set that subnet. I think you get to set a /16 subnet to start with, but certainly, obviously, with these type of VPNs, there can be conflict. So you have got that ability at that point, but in terms of what we give it, it's obviously taken from that pool of IP addresses.
It's great. All right, so Andrew asked, was during the demo, was that VM that you restored from on-prem to Azure, VMware, or Hyper-V VM?
It was a VMware VM,
There you go. Good.
which makes it even more cool, right?
Exactly. Let's see. It's I'm looking at Kevin's question here. It's free as an RC, but will a purchase be required upon going GA?
The answer there is no. So,
No.
Vic,
Right, it's
yeah,
free.
it's like straight up no. It's a free product. So, yeah, definitely free.
Gotcha. Let's see. Kevin also asks, is there the ability to script this process to automate Veeam PN and VN recovery?
Yeah, so under the hood, there's actually a bunch of configuration files said we will be releasing some other documentation upon GA. Effectively, just as a short notice, the guy that created this is just a really good scripter. So he's been thinking about these sort of scripting methodologies from the start. So upon GA, we should have a bunch of documentation that actually allows the ability to script the process and automate it like you wanted.
Cool. Good. Let's see. Chris asked, what's going on at the remote site? We usually use firewall-based VPNs. How are sites going to flip over during a DR event?
Okay, if we use firewall-based VPNs, how are sites going to flip over? Um, so this, if you're using a firewall-based VPN, I mean, isn't that just yet. I mean, this is a V1.0 product to us at the moment. It's going to be 1.0 shortly. We could lend ourselves to do more firewall-based VPNing as we go. And the one thing that this doesn't have, if you guys notice, it doesn't have a whole bunch of security features at the moment. So effectively, if you're logging in, you've got access to a lot of these networks. Under the hood, there's IP tables. So you could actually log into the CLI of the Ubuntu machine. And if you guys are good with IP tables, you could do some rules there to actually get some of those restrictions in place. But at the moment, it's not through the GUI or the UI. But yeah, in terms of your questions, how a site's going to flip over during a DR event, it's really about that extension. So I'm not sure if I get the question 100%, but yeah, effectively, if you've got a firewall-based VPN initially, I think we'll just bypass that and use the Azure, the VPN services site to site to actually create that connection. I'm sorry if I haven't answered that question correctly.
All right, so Frank asked, is it possible to migrate the VM which is restored to Azure back to production?
That is a good question, Frank. Okay, so at this point, okay, so if you're doing that into Microsoft Azure, it's in there, and there's no fallback capability with our Veeam Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure just yet. But there are ways that you can do it. So you could actually then install our Veeam agent to bring it back. At the moment, it's the best answer to that question.
That's good. So James asked, this may be similar to the question two questions ago. Will this still work for externally facing services? Like, would our firewall still forward traffic to the internal IP, which would then go via the local PN appliance and then up to Azure?
Yeah, so I think what you're asking there is if you extend it. So if you in the scenario there where I lost a workload or a particular bunch of workloads, you can obviously on your site gateway or that's your core routing system, you can put a static route in there, which will then tell it where to go. So you put that static route in there on the on-premises location to say for the IP address or subnet that's living remotely in Azure or another remote location, the next hop IP address is the Veeam PN site gateway. And then it will basically be able to route that traffic out through there to the hub and be able to do its thing.
Gotcha, good. So Jeff S. asked, how would this work with the failover failback and Veeam backup and recovery in backup and replication?
How would this work? I'm just looking at that way. Okay, so this isn't linked to that. Or I guess it's talking about replication there. This isn't linked to
Yep.
that as well. So it's a completely separate entity in a sense. They're not together at the moment.
And then Jeff C. asked, what's the main advantage of using Veeam Direct Restore or Veeam Disaster Recovery versus the Azure DSR?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer that one in a politically correct way. um, uh, yeah, look, Veeam just works, right? Like I can't really answer that any more different than that, I don't think. Yeah, obviously we're
Yeah,
biased, right? Like we know that the Veeam Direct Restore to Microsoft Azure is a really good solution. It's proven, it's trusted, it works really well. So yeah, I mean, all I could say there is look, test both of them out, see how they go, and see which one works best for you.
it's a good answer. Backstop Solutions IT office asked, Veeam PM is free at the moment. Is there a plan to charge for it in the future?
Okay,
And
yeah, I
obviously
think
when the GA comes out, there's not currently.
yeah, no, definitely, it's free for the immediate future and probably long term as well. I would have thought.
Yeah, and Frank had another question. Which port do we need to open? Looks like it says iFirewall for the Veeam PN hub on premises as a service provider.
Okay, so what port do we need to open in the firewall for VPN? So you saw, Frank, when I was configuring, especially on the Azure Marketplace deployment, we had those port 1194 and 6179. That's the default ports that you'd need to allow outbound. Okay, if you're configuring it, if you're actually hosting that hub as an SP, and that's your hub that is outside of Azure, but you've done it on a standalone, then you'd obviously need to open those ports as well inbound, and also be able to sort of get to the web interface and the SSH interface as well. So on the on-premises side, the remote location, it's really just about having that outbound connection out to whatever you configure on the main hub appliance.
Yeah, I just saw this from Backstop as well. Extending on the answer about how best to get Veeam backups into Azure, what would be the best way to get a full repository from a main office into Azure in order to withstand a complete loss of operation at a main office and thus the loss of the repository.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you can have a Veeam repository server in Azure. That works same. In fact, Azure announced a couple of weeks ago 4 terabyte hard drives, which make that even more plausible today than what it was previously, right? So that's the best way to do it. You can have that sitting there ready to go effectively. So that's the way that I would actually think about doing that. Obviously, cost comes into play there if you're going to be replicating the whole or having a repository that's in Azure. You have to think about the costs that are associated with that and go from there. But that would be definitely a way to do it.
Yeah, and then Edwin asks, can you do this DR with zero data loss?
Zero data loss. So no, this isn't a what we would term a CDP type of scenario, so
Right.
continuous data replication. But stay tuned for more product on that to come in V10.
Yeah, and that looks like that's about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have recorded this just for those of you. I know there's a few of you who asked about that, and we'll be sending an email out to you next week and with a link to that specific recording.
cool. Awesome. Well, that was excellent. Thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully it was useful to you guys. And yeah, please feel free to go out and download the RC and be ready for GA.
It's great.
All right.